Happy Friday, everyone. Just giving it a moment for our podcast community audience to get settled into this virtual learning space. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I am so delighted to host this space of learners as we learn with and from each other. Do me a favor and find the chat and let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. That is always, always, always a big treat for us to see the different geographies that are represented, both within the states and outside, all over the country. It really excites us to know that you find value in our content that we provide through our podcast and that you decide to spend this hour with us. And if you feel inclined, also let us know into the chat what your LinkedIn information is. And that gives us permission to reach out to you so we can stay connected even beyond this window of time. My team will also add my LinkedIn. I certainly would delight in being connected to each of you on LinkedIn. I want to also just acknowledge all of the individuals that are joining us via LinkedIn Live. There are some people that register in advance and they become a part of our community by the Zoom feature, but then there are also some folks that catch us live on LinkedIn. If you are part of the LinkedIn Live audience, then you can use the comment section throughout our hour together today. And we are watching that closely. My team is bringing some of those sentiments and conversations into the Zoom chat so that we all can be connected as we learn with and from each other. At NWC, we really do value disability inclusion, so we have enabled closed caption for those that would benefit from it, want to put that into your hearing. I also want you to know that if you're part of the Zoom community, then cameras are welcome. We do love to see smiling faces, but we are also keenly aware that many of you are maybe multitasking. And so we are just glad that you're here in any capacity, even if you're just listening in. And we're so excited for an amazing show today. Okay, once again, this is Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we intersect dialogue of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership and business. And once again, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. Let the conversations begin, indeed, and that is precisely what we are about to do. Once again, you've joined the Intentional Conversations VodCast, and we're so glad you're here. One of the things we like to do is to just mention some of the national observances that are taking place, just so that it can incite us to go deeper into our cultural knowledge and understanding of different communities. And so we are in the month of May, and it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, AAPI. And so I hope that you're doing all that you can to stand in solidarity with members of that community. We also are still in May, and this is a big topic for me, and I certainly like to take every opportunity that I can in and outside of the month of May to share the importance of all of us helping to be a part of breaking the stigma around mental health. We need to talk about it. We need to build up awareness and make sure that all of our loved ones and friends and acquaintances are doing their part to ensure they're building up their awareness and strengthening their mental health. And so even though we're going into the last week of May, let's make sure we continue that conversation. We are on the heels of June, and in June, there's a lot of different opportunities from an observance perspective. It is Pride Month. It's also Juneteenth, and I want you to know that if you're one of those individuals that's part of an organization where you're scrambling right now, still trying to figure out what do we do to meaningfully acknowledge Juneteenth, then we would love to partner with you to curate a really useful and meaningful experience that really helps us to center on this message of freedom, which all of us can align with. And so call us up, let us know what you're thinking, and we'd love to be a thought partner with you to bring such an experience to life. I want to give you an opportunity to just join us for some additional resources where you can deepen your knowledge and understanding of all things DEIB. For the longest now, for years, we have been putting out new content every single week as part of a video series called Inclusion Uncomplicated, where we simplify DEI. The one that was released this week is on institutional discrimination. If you would like to be a part of never missing content through our Inclusion Uncomplicated video series, then I encourage you to get out those smartphones right now, scan that QR code, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This will ensure that you get those alerts and you will never miss our content. We also have started something new here at NWC where we are inviting those that are part of our community who would like to get their information via text. We're sending out texts, not to inundate you, maybe just like once or twice a month at most, but it's really to make sure that you are alerted of times to register for our Intentional Conversations podcast or any other upcoming news that we want you to be aware of. And so if that feels of interest to you, then scan that QR code. We're happy to add you to the list and to make sure that you are a part of the In the Know group for all things NWC and DEIB. Now, I also want to give you a quick heads up that as we close out the month of May, next Friday, we have a wonderful additional Intentional Conversations episode that's going to be brought to you. And I'm so excited to welcome our guest co-host that week, Casey Ariel Tobias. And so I hope on the 31st, you're available to join us for that conversation. And we are going to be addressing the state of Black women-owned businesses, the legal landscape around DEI, particularly its implications on all race-based initiatives that aim to close access gaps, and then also pathways to financial activism and social entrepreneurship. Those are all topics that I know are really near and dear to Casey's heart. And so I can't wait for you to hear from her and be a part of that conversation next Friday. So do join us and share it out with others. I'll also just mention that to start off June, we do have Narupa Netram that's going to be joining us. She's a partner with NWC, so we look forward to that. We have Abby Adamson coming up in June. And so we have lots to look forward to as we enter into the start of our summer months. Now, it does me great pleasure. So if you've been with us, you know that at this point in time of the show, I take an opportunity to formally introduce our guest co-host for the week. And I do so by reading the individual's bio. Sometimes, our guests will say, oh, Dr. White, you do not have to read my bio. Let's just jump right into the conversation. But for me, it is a matter of respect. It is a matter of ensuring that our vodcast community knows all the accolades, the credentials, the experiences in which our guest co-hosts show up to the conversation. And so it is important to me to do so. And today will be no different. Okay, so Paul Ladipo is our guest co-host today, and Paul has a combined 10 years of experience in academia, nonprofits, and faith communities, becoming well-versed in the DEI challenges and needs of each sector. In higher ed, he has facilitated bystander intervention and sexual misconduct trainings with athletic teams, discussed systemic racism with faculty, and led full-day workshops on building inclusive cultures with student leaders. For nonprofits, Paul has developed curriculum to center the needs of persons with disabilities, survivors of intimate partner violence, and survivors of sexual assault. Within faith communities, he has given presentations and led discussions on breaking racial barriers to create multi-ethnic ministries. If you have heard me prior to today introduce that we have Paul that's going to be joining our podcast, I have said to you that his content is a scroll stopper. So let me just go ahead and mention that if you're not following Paul, I advise that you do so and do so immediately today, and you will soon see why. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can bring Paul into the spotlight. I'm adding you, Paul. Hi.
Hello.
I'm going to give you a chance to greet this audience in your own way. And as they are placing different accolades and words of affirmation and welcome into the chat so that you can feel the spirit of this community, I'm going to let you know that part of how we asked all of our guest co-hosts to greet our audience is to share something with us that we would not know from reading or hearing your bio, which we just did, or Paul, from looking at your LinkedIn profile.
Mhm.
So welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for
I'm
having
going to
me.
turn it over to you.
For me, like on LinkedIn, I'm pretty forthright and I say the stuff that just gets people all in a tizzy and worked up, but you know, I'm a big kid inside and I'm an unapologetic nerd. In fact, I call myself a black nerd, so I love the term blurred and like I'm a 40 plus blurred. I like video games and board games and just like, and at the end of the day, sometimes a lot of times when my kids and wife are asleep, I play video games to kind of decompress. I was telling him more how like I watched shows about big powerful CEOs and so how sometimes at night or they decompress by playing with model trains or something. And I respect that because life is stressful. This DI is stressful. You know, it's my calling, but it's stressful. And me having that alone time and playing video games or board games with friends, it allows me to recharge so I can keep doing what I'm doing because a lot of people burn out. I'm like, well, I'm gonna fight this. I'm gonna stand this. So I'm gonna do what I need to do to protect my peace and have fun and then go right back into battle the next day.
Yes, and the intentionality of the use of the word battle, I think, is appropriate. While it's hard for us who really care deeply about this work and space to use language like that because it feels so violent. But that is how the experience feels on many given days. And so I love the fact that you're finding ways to bring yourself joy through some other pastimes like video games that allows you to decompress, so that you can continue the great fight of all the work that we do. Thanks so much for sharing with us a little bit more about yourself. We always love to hear those fun tidbits. It just helps us to get a deeper connection to our guest co-host. So I want to jump right in, and there's so much that we can talk about today. I want to start with actually acknowledging the fact that part of what you deal with is survivors of intimate partner violence. And we have seen over the past week where a particular famous artist has been in the news. And I think that many of us are aware of who we're talking about. But just to take away the suspense for those of you who maybe have been under a rock and I don't know, somewhere else, it is Diddy, P. Diddy. And we have been witness to the brutality of his acts of abuse against Cassie, his then girlfriend at the time. And so I just want to hold space for that as a conversation that I know is top of mind for a lot of people right now. And I have seen some of the responses that you've shared on LinkedIn, but I just want to give you the floor to kind of react to that.
Yeah, I mean it you know, whatever a celebrity, so whether it's Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, Diddy, Weinstein, I mean,
Yes.
people are just like, oh, he would never do that. And it's like, well, you know what? You don't know this person. And
Yeah.
I can respect celebrities. I understand the need to admire celebrities, but him and Harrison Butker, the Kansas City Chiefs kicker, it's like, you know what?
Yes.
They're human like the rest of us, and humans are very biased. The difference is these people kick footballs better and play basketball better and kick rhymes better than we do, but they're still human. And it's like when you're like, oh, he would never do that. I'm like, well, you don't really know him. You don't know
Yeah.
them, and it's like so it, false accusations do happen, but they're rare. And so like when this stuff like this comes out, you gotta like it's good to believe the survivors, believe the story,
Yes.
and when people open up, like don't it may not be that the story of Diddy, but it's like, a lot of times people find courage when they hear stories of Diddy and Harrison Butker and whatnot and Bill Cosby and the people say, hey, when I was 17, I got assaulted. And so they're feeling motivated to open up. So don't belittle them, and or make light of their situation. That I mean that we need to hear these stories because that's going to motivate people to speak up and speak out, And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if people keep making the same mistakes over and over and over, and it's like, well, you don't know Diddy, and Diddy doesn't know you, and quite frankly, Diddy doesn't care about you. So,
That part,
uh,
yes, he has since come out, of course, and had a statement of regret, if that's what we want to call it. Many have criticized that it's not really regret. You got caught. It's been years later. Needless to say, I think that we are going to soon find what the fate's going to be, and it's undeniable now. And I'm seeing that there are also some other organizations that have partnered with him in some regards that are now rethinking, some of those partnerships, and rightfully so. But to your point, let's believe these survivors. And specifically, I want to call out, let's believe Black women, because I think
yes.
that that population of people are, the first to not be believed. And I think that saddens me. So to your point, Paul, it is great that, if nothing else, the silver lining is that people are beginning to realize the issues that affect Black women when they do come forth with information. Not to take away from any other survivors, but I think that that has been at least one of the positivities, if there ever could be any, that I have seen from the release of the videos. And you also, in the same take, you mentioned Harrison Butcher, and yes, A lot of us have been saying that just what a missed opportunity. I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet where NFL has come out, but I did see where I think the Chiefs have come out with a statement saying that they don't represent those same thoughts and sentiments. But have you seen anything from the NFL?
No, I've heard I saw an article or at least the headline saying that the Chiefs are distancing either NFL or Chiefs are
Oh,
distancing themselves from him, but it's not the same as discipline, and so
yeah. There you
I,
go.
we'll see what happens as time goes on. But it's like a hot mess that happened. Then also he made some comments about Nike and Kaepernick. I'm like, okay, so like, but I'm not. I wasn't surprised, but I am surprised at the same time. I'm like, yeah, I
Yeah.
because usually the people that talk about women like that and LGBTQ people like that, a lot of the times they're not so high on black people either. And so
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you know,
Yeah, there's something to be said for how society is so quick to give celebrities the mic and these platforms without any recognition of let me vet and understand what perspectives that they have and I think that we've seen a lot of harm occur because of that, and I think there's something to be said for the media being a bit more thoughtful in that regard. Those individuals, they do have a lot of influence, and I think there's a responsibility that comes with such a title of being in the public eye. And so anyway, I wanted to also bring that to the conversation. But thank you for giving us a moment just to kind of enlighten ourselves and hold space for some of the recent news that I know is top of mind for a lot of people. I want to jump back to you and your journey, Paul. As I was reading your bio, there's so many different, connection points that really allows you to show up to this work the way that you do. So, can you tell us about what your journey has been? How has all of this interest in DEI initially be instigated, and where are you finding the greatest joy
yeah.
and the greatest pain points around being in this space?
Oh boy. So I said the journey started like um to make this an elevator speech, not a 2 hour rambling session. I was an academic advisor in higher ed, and my students would open up about we were in the conservative Midwest, like Kansas,
Mm,
conservative Kansas, and my students of color, LGBTQ plus students, even women students would be like, you know what, something just feels off here, and like I don't feel in place, and they don't really know about black people or Muslims or what's it like to be a Latina here, and so over time, I really, or not even over time, but rather quickly, I stopped caring about the courses they took. I mean, yeah, I didn't want them to fail and I wanted them to finish college, but I wasn't interested in
yes.
chemistry 210 anymore. Like, I don't give a crap about calculus 251 or whatever it's called. I care about what issues are affecting you as a black woman in the conservative
Mhm.
Midwest, what issues are affecting you as a queer Muslim person in the Midwest. And so I did a DEI shift. I'm like, I want to know more about the systems that are oppressing you, not about what courses you're taking.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine too that Paul, that made you a very well trusted advisor that demonstrated care and compassion. They often say people don't want to know what you know until they know that you care,
Yeah.
and I can see your care and concern even show forth through a lot of your content, particularly LinkedIn, and so that worked for you, and then you found that there was this space and this niche and this body of work that was connected to your care, compassion, and concern for others. So tell me about how this ended up also finding its way into like the faith-based community, because also in your bio, I
Yeah.
shared that you do this work and
Yeah.
not only, higher ed, but then also you do it in faith ministries, communities, and in nonprofits.
Yeah, this was way back in 2006. Wow, it was a long time ago. Or not really, but I remember one day I was looking for a new ministry and because I got out of a rather toxic ministry, abusive one, and so a friend was
Mm,
like, "Well, just join mine." I was like, "Okay," and so I just showed up. I didn't have any real expectations, and so but it was actually a Korean church, and so I walked in the building and I see pictures of, Korean people and I see and I can smell like somebody was cooking food. I can smell kimchi, and and just like it
Mm,
being like art, and seeing a lot of East Asian art throughout the building, and it just something like hit me, I was like, wow, what is this? And so, because I think when it comes to Christianity, when people view Christianity, they think either like white evangelical Christianity or black gospel, black
yeah.
Baptist, but it's like to see like this East Asian thriving ministry that was welcoming and they cook food and me learning about Asian culture and things like that. It just like wow, it lit a fire up under me. Um, and then around the same time, I was in graduate school and um, I wasn't part of the cohort, but I was adopted into it. But there was a cohort of black and brown students who were trying to prepare for graduate school, and it was called the prep program. And so, and I befriended them. And me being a person of color, like in the predominantly white conservative school, town, state, whatever, like I hung out with them, and there was this program that was trying to prepare them for PhD programs, and we were
Mhm.
we were black American, we were Nigerian, we were Latina, we were Filipina, and just like. And it just, they were people to hang out with, on a weekly basis, and so those two things together like really like just kind of kickstarted my desire for this. And then if years later, 5 or 6 years later, me being an academic advisor, I'm like, it came back full circle. It came back, and it's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in all these courses and career paths. I
Yeah.
want to know about your experiences as a black person in the Midwest or whatever. So
Hmm. Hmm. No, that's great. So a lot of your content, it addresses this what is the right word for it? It's disturbing. That's one word
yes.
for it. But a lot of the what we're seeing and hearing and experiencing regarding the anti-DEI movement. And so I would love for you to enlighten us from your perspective. What do you think, Paul, are the main factors that have led to the rise
Yeah.
of the anti-DEI movement?
I'll be real honest with you. It started
Please
with
do.
it
Shoot it
started
to us
I
straight.
wanted to name some names. It started with Christopher Rufo, Bill Ackman, and Donald Trump. And so let's backtrack to 2020 when
Okay.
George Floyd, and somebody even said that tomorrow marks the fourth anniversary of George Floyd's murder. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
with that happening, I remember coming home from work and my wife was like, "Oh, did you see this video?" And like I heard about it, but I'm not gonna watch it. And so and then so many people saw this man get choked out on video, and then all of a sudden there was this racial awakening, and businesses were pledging money to back black businesses, and all of a sudden all this DI terminology hit the internet, and so like white privilege and systemic racism and yada yada, and all these terms got thrown around, and there was this brief racial awakening, and then suddenly, and then like hard right conservatives, and I say hard right or far right, I'm not saying all conservatives, but
Yeah.
they saw that and were threatened by that. Like, what can we do to swing the pendulum the other way? And so what they
Mm-hmm.
did was Trump and some other prominent Republicans picked a fight with the 1619 Project by Nicole
Yeah.
Hannah Jones, or no,
Yeah.
it was Hannah
Yeah.
Nicole Jones. I mixed the order of it, but like she around the time that came out, and
Yeah.
so and they picked a fight with that, and then CRT, even though nobody knew what CRT was, it'd been around for 40 years plus years, and so they found two things to pick on. And to sway the pendulum the other way. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, white people are bad, and we're saying white people are bad, and
Um,
victimizing white people and yada yada. And then this guy named Chris Rufo took over because Trump left office, Biden came in, and Chris Rufo he carried the torch where Trump started. And so he's like, there's even a tweet, or at least a saved tweet, somebody screenshotted of him saying, we're going to make it a catch up. We're going to make CRT a catch all term, anything DEI, anti-racism related. And we're going to make this like, we're going to toxify the terminology. And it worked. And so,
worked.
in the beginning of 2021, the pendulum swung the other direction. It's like, oh,
Um,
CRT, and now it's DEI, and so now it's CRT, catchphrase mainly DEI, and anti-racism, and whatever. And it's just like people, so he targeted people that were either misinformed or already biased, and appeals to the prejudices of people that are
yeah.
misinformed or who do know, but they don't want it. And so it's like a modern day witch hunt. It's like
It is.
or even a smear campaign. It's like
Right.
think about like high school where you pick up, it's like you pick on a kid that doesn't say much, and so you make up a bunch of stuff about them, and then people are like, oh, really?
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. the whole space is being bullied right now. And what I don't want to be missed from this conversation is that all of the efforts to bully the space, to devalue the space, was very calculated. It was very intentional. It was very strategic. And in many regards, it's working with a lot of individuals. We have seen it where people are pulling back their budgets. They are shifting and halting a lot of the programs and initiatives that they were committed to at once. And so there has not been a DEI practitioner that at least I've been in community with that has not felt the pressure of the time. Now, what I don't also want people to perceive is that all of us are kind of fully leaning into it and we're just kind of throwing our hands up and saying, well, oh, well, the fate is here. This is what it is. We can't change it. I am respectful of the emotional capacity that varies from person to person. And many individuals have left the space as a result of what they're seeing and experiencing. And there's no judgment at all on my part. I think that people have to first and foremost take care of self as they are deciding how they want to navigate what we're seeing and experiencing. But I am also one of those practitioners that I will stand firmly on the fact that this work is not going anywhere. It is not. As long as we're going to live in a society where we have people and we have a lot of different cultures and backgrounds and experiences, then we're going to need to continue to lean into this strong message of intentionality and deepen our commitment around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I just wanted to toss that out there. And I will tell you that if we have thought that we've reached the pinnacle of the violence of the attacks on this space, as we near the election, we are probably going to experience more of it. So that's not to cause us to be afraid. It is to say, let's brace ourselves. Let's make sure we're taking care of ourselves. But let's, as you started, let's continue to be able to stay in the fight, stay in the battle, because that is what it is right now, unfortunately. But it's true. Okay, so let's kind of stay here for a moment. I want Paul for you to help us to understand a little bit more about the anti-DEI sentiments and movements. How have you seen the anti-DEI sentiment impact the sectors that you've worked in, such as, of course, academia, nonprofits,
Yeah.
and even the faith communities? Let's kind
Yeah.
of make it plain for all those different sectors.
Boy. Let's do one sector at a time. So like, I would say within the academia, look at repealing affirmative action. Like I remember last
Of
summer
course.
when affirmative action was repealed, I made a post and that like I thought it'd do well, but it like blew up and I got a lot of hateful comments and it's still up. You can go back to it and I cleaned it up,
Yeah,
but it's still some comment. The stuff, the really hateful stuff I already deleted or blocked. So my block list doubled that day,
I'm sure.
and,
Yeah.
and
And, sometimes I say, though, if you aren't ruffling feathers, then are you truly being effective? I mean, there's a little bit of discomfort that just comes with the territory, right?
this is my post earlier this week about white supremacy and like
Yes.
that causes
Yes.
stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just so appealing affirmative action and abolishing DEI departments and it's like you're saying this is so divisive. Like these departments have been around for since the '60s, or the DEI has been
Yeah.
around since the '60s, and now you're like paying it as this divisive, like you didn't even know what DEI was. You still don't know what it is,
Right.
and so and then I'd say with faith communities, it's sad to say a lot of Christians, oppose it, even though it's in an ideal world, because scripture has, or at least has people that have been marginalized. So like women,
Yeah.
LGBTQ folks, persons with disabilities, they're in scripture, you see they've been marginalized. And yet you as a Christian are going to oppose, is giving you an example of people being marginalized, and yet you're going to oppose something that's designed to help marginalized people. So being marginalized is nothing new, and
Right.
so, and yet you're going to oppose this. It's like, do you realize what you're doing here? And you're giving Christianity a bad name. I hate to say
Yeah.
it. And I'm not going to speak to other religions because I don't know about Islam or Judaism, and
Sure.
those religions are already marginalized as it is. So, but I can speak to Christianity. I'm like, you're really causing a lot of damage.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's been a number of faith-based communities that have been under attack as well and have been discriminated against, and so yeah, we're definitely seeing it across all sectors. Which again, it just brings to light this is not going away because none of those sectors are without people. So our world is not without people. So I think that's important just to amplify. Now, you often talk about the 21st century racism because some people say, of course, Paul, that racism doesn't exist,
Yeah.
but anyway. anyway. So let's talk about it from a 21st century perspective. In what ways does it differ from racism of previous decades?
Well, I look at it, you think of like continued health disparity. So like, black
Yeah.
mothers dying having 4 times the death rate of white mothers,
Yes.
because medical racism is still a thing and it's still a problem. And so
Absolutely.
so yeah, they're not, doctors aren't breeding slaves, but like they still have that racism that started in slavery passed down from generation to generation. And so they think that black women can handle pain better, so they give them less medication, and it's like,
Right.
we're not magical creatures. Well, we are, but like not in that sort of way, I mean,
Absolutely.
so that, I think about income disparities, predatory loans, like the loan people in inner cities, you got like all these payday loan places that prey upon
Right.
poor people that are trying to get to their next paycheck, and then they get this money and they owe 4 times the amount because of interest, and
Hmm. And even redlining. I mean, it may not
yeah.
operate the same way it did before, but there's still a lot of that within our systems. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'll go and say I'll say a lot of people of color racially marginalized people have internalized racism and they support these policies. And so I
Yes.
know one of my connections, I believe I would give her a shout out. Amanda Fernandez. She's in Canada. She had a line that was the best thing. She's like, sometimes the colonized colonize better than the colonizers, or they do it better than the colonized. And I'm like,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, in that affirmative action post that I made last summer, the most hurtful comments were from other people of color. I'm like, I'm advocating for
Oh,
like you, and you're saying this. It's not
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Either because they don't know, or they generally don't know or don't understand systemic racism, or they've internalized to the point where they're trying to appeal to whiteness. And so
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I think about Dr. Janice Gassim's book, Decentering Whiteness. I mean, it's so true. The internalized oppression is a topic that I don't think that we really amplify enough, but it is part of the problem as well. So I think that we should be talking about it more often than we do. But yeah, you just said something that I thought was worth kind of repeating. And this was apparently we were quoting Amanda Fernandez, but the colonized is so colonized, I don't even know that they're colonized.
right.
That is, let's let that sink in for a moment. That is so true. And so it's definitely it's definitely something that's deeply embedded and conditioned into many of our minds and just our, how in which we just show up to the world. And so we have to keep talking about it. You also speak to what you refer to as nice racism. So let's talk about nice racism. What is that, and how can nice racism be effectively addressed?
Like I lived all my life in the Midwest. I've lived in 4 Midwestern states, and I like living in the Midwest, but there's like this, the Midwest is not as diverse as the coast, and so it's a lot of primarily white, conservative, be it politically or religiously or just personality wise, and so it's just kind of like we don't talk about things that are unpleasant, and so anything
Yeah,
you better have a good reason. And so like talking about racism is not the nice thing to do. And even though I live in Minnesota and Minnesota is progressive, it's like it's like how far about racism can I talk without upsetting you, and so one, we don't talk about night in a nice culture, we don't talk about things that aren't nice. Also, it's like I think being nice is the way to end racism, and it's like, well, yeah, you can bake me cookies, you can say I love black people, I mean that's fine and dandy, but do you understand systemic racism and we need to dismantle it? So you can bake cookies for me, you can sell at black people and like fine, we're all one family, tell me all that. But it's like if you don't understand systemic racism, we're not gonna fix anything, I mean you can, so I don't know. So that's nice racism.
yeah, yeah. And I think so many of us experience it every single day. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So let's talk about navigating conversations around the woke culture. I mean, you referenced this earlier, but of course, CRT was attacked and woke was attacked. And how do you, Paul, find appropriate strategies to help navigate conversations in your workshops and presentations, especially considering when addressing the skepticism and the resistance that a lot of people show up to these conversations with?
I Emotional intelligence is a big part of what I
Yeah.
my one of my big values. The fact that, and I'll give another shout out to Dr. Farah
All right.
Harris. Yeah, her
Yes,
book,
I love her.
yeah, I know her
Yep.
book, Tell of Emotional
Oh,
Intelligence.
it's amazing. Yeah, she's
It's
been
a
on our
gold.
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, I'm going to ask the team to see if they can look up the link. So for those of you who may have missed it, you can check that out. But yeah, she does a wonderful work around intersecting conversations of DEI and EQ. Yeah.
yeah, and I would say that that book is a gold mine because I think doing this work, so years ago in 2020, um, I was had a random conversation with a connection of mine. He was saying, yeah, emotional intelligence is the key to any racism, and like I believed him. But then a couple of years later, and I posted about it, and Fire Harris was like, yeah, I'm writing a book about it. I'm like, and it came back to what my friend said 4 years ago because it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of this white so like white fragility and anti-DI and abolishing that's poor emotional intelligence around this issue. It's like, yeah, I know there's racism, even within people of color. It's like, yeah, racism and white supremacy are tough topics that bring up a lot of visceral emotions, but it's like you have to pinpoint and navigate those and find a way out of those
Yeah.
so you can really like grow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I find that a lot of practitioners, including this is a practice that we leverage at NWC as well, but before jumping into those really intense, conversations, how are we priming our audience to be aligned around some common norms and, community agreements so that people are at least being exposed to the expectations of how to enter and engage in these difficult conversations? And so I do think that there have been some practices that have been introduced that people are starting to leverage more often. But sometimes people dig their heels in and they're like, I'm showing up to this conversation because my company is making me, and you're not going to make a believer out of me. So you do have those resistors, and I know firsthand how hard it can be to look out and see the arms crossed, the slouching in the seat. I mean, all the body language is reading, I don't want to be here, so hurry up, please, and yeah, and that becomes difficult. But then I also am very appreciative when I can look out and I can see really engaged people that are taking notes, that are contributing to the conversations. And so I often like to just bring some light to our work because, on those hard days when we are noticing the person with the folded arms and the slouchiness in their seat, and the body language is saying, I don't want to be here. I think it's important for us to also make sure we aren't not acknowledging those who are really trying to be on their personal learning journey so they can start applying the information as best as they can to be a part of the solution. So I think that's just important to acknowledge. What are some unique challenges that you face, Paul, when developing DEI curriculum for different sectors that you support?
Um, I I think challenging for me is like getting people to understand the difference between racial prejudice and racism because I think what
Mhm.
makes the anti-DEI movement so strong is that people are like, oh, now you're being racist against white people, you're being sexist against men or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah,
look, I'm not saying that prejudice against white people doesn't exist, just like prejudice doesn't against men doesn't. Yeah, prejudice against men exists just like prejudice against white people exists. But
yeah,
there's a difference between prejudice and racism. Like there's a difference between prejudice and sexism. It's like this the definition of racism is so chopped and skewed that like and it's favoring the anti-DEI crowd because a lot of people are like, oh, we're victims now, and if I
yeah,
even had and so what I try to do is I try to establish like, look, we need to have a true understanding of what racism means. It's not just I don't like somebody because of their skin color or whatever, it's a system of inequity
yeah,
that impacts people of color, black people disproportionately, and black and indigenous just disproportionately. And so, um, because now that they've taken the definition of racism and run with it, now it's like people are going like, oh, now you're being racist against white people. And now we're abolishing DEI and all these initiatives that are designed to level the playing field. Now you're gonna actually widen the disparities instead of narrow them, And so it plays in the hands of the masterminds and the people that don't know any better are helping them out. And so yeah,
yeah, no,
grows up on
reverse racism, which
yeah.
is not a thing. Yeah. So thank you for the clarity around, racial prejudice versus racism. I think that's really important distinction there to call out. So this is the time in the show that I give our audience a heads up that we are going to invite you to be a part of our conversation as well. And you can do so by using the raise hand feature if you're part of our Zoom community. That lets us know that you're willing for us to add you to the spotlight and invite you to unmute yourself and share your comments or questions directly. Or if you're here and you want your question to be presented on your behalf or your comments really socialize with this community, you can use the chat. If you're joining us LinkedIn Live, then go to the comment section. My team is watching the comment section closely and we'll bring some of those thoughts, sentiments, and questions over to this community as well. So I'll give you some moments to kind of percolate and think on maybe some curiosities that are coming up for you while I go to my next question. So I want to talk a little bit about the advice that, Paul, you would give to individuals and organizations that are starting their DEI journey. And specifically, let's say starting their DEI journey right now in this moment in time with all the noise, all the devaluing this election year, because some people are saying, let's just wait till maybe the dust settles and then we'll start. What's your advice to the individuals who are looking to start now?
Oh yeah, do so now because we don't know what's going to happen in November, and then and then and you know what? Just because it doesn't matter who's in office, DI is always going to be
So
needed. So
true.
it's like, you know, I mean, well, one of my posts it didn't get a lot of traction, but I feel that was one of my better ones. I said like racism is not a partisan issue, so anti-racism shouldn't be a partisan issue either because really I can see racism on both sides. So whether you're Biden, Trump, independent, I don't know, whoever, Obama,
Yeah.
it's like it's always needed because there's always been racism and just it's just that what racism looks like differs from decade to
Yeah.
decade, century to century, or who's in office to who's in office, and so um yeah, like start now. Don't wait till November, I mean, because we don't know who's going to be in power in November, what might
No,
happen. So I don't know. So don't wait till the
don't
fire.
wait.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait at all. I totally agree with that direction. Don't wait. Just get in there and start the work now. Okay, so I'm seeing one question so far from Toki. Toki's a member of our community. Thank you for being here today, Toki. And her question is, do you think that those in power who dismantle DEIB efforts are trying to derail any progress for reparations?
Yes,
What are
they
your
are.
thoughts on that?
Oh, they definitely are.
Yeah, I would say 100% too. Yeah.
They don't always bring it up, but I know they do because they're not. A lot of them complain like, "Oh, this is racist." I'm like, "Oh, this is racist. Giving reparations is
Yeah.
racist." Never mind the fact that other groups have had reparations paid to them. Like I've heard Asian Americans have gotten reparations because of concentration camps in the early 20th century, and I've heard other marginalized groups have gotten reparations, but somehow us getting reparations that's racist. I mean, so like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, if they don't want to, give us our dignity, our respect, our equity, then of course they don't want to give us reparations, right? So yeah, rest assured that there's definitely lots of efforts behind the scenes that are calculated right now to disrupt that as well. So speaking of which, while we're allowing people to continue percolating on questions or comments that are coming up, with this being the election year, what advice have you been given organizational leaders who maybe have inquired with you? What should we be doing to brace ourselves in the recognition that civil discourse is something that we need to be preparing our workforce for, and even just this respectability and trying to minimize and eliminate hate speech as much as possible. What kind of suggestions are you giving to organizations that's looking for some guidance in that regard?
I'm like, what, buckle up for the long haul because I have no faith that even if Biden were to win again or or somebody else besides Trump won, it's like we're in such a hot mess. It's like like even if no matter who's in office, like the anti-DEI folks are committed. And then they've shown that because they're repealing affirmative action. They've been trying to repeal affirmative action for what 40 some odd years, 50 years, and so they're committed. So you got to be committed too for the long haul. And so don't let who's in office determine whether you do the work or not, because
Absolutely.
I don't know. And people say, "Oh, they're a minority." It's like what? It doesn't matter if they're powerful and committed enough, and if they get in the right spaces, they can do a lot of damage. I mean, look at what happened with South
Oh
Africa
yeah.
and British India. It was
Oh yeah.
a minority that did a lot of damage.
Yes, 100%, 100%. It goes back to don't wait, just get into, the intentional engagement of the work now, because literally our society, the health of our society relies on each of us doing our part. So, I have said several times, I've mentioned a couple times today, but even, in your absence leading up to you joining us today, Paul, as I was letting the community know that you were going to be like a guest co-host, I've been saying his content is scroll stoppers. I never pass your name on LinkedIn without stopping and reading, or at least saving, because a lot of times we are now seeing long format content that's really rich and kind of deeper than um, maybe we've seen before when LinkedIn was kind of in the earlier years, and I appreciate that. But I'm curious, what is your process for really kind of determining what you're going to write about, the extent in which you're going to go, because you don't hold back, which is great. And then I would love for you to just socialize maybe around 1 to 2 content areas that you have specifically in the top of your mind, as I had no idea, because you referenced one earlier, but I had no idea this was going to get this much attention. So your process, and maybe 1 or 2 of those content areas that you're like, wow,
Yeah.
had no idea.
I guess a lot of times it's either something has said on one of my posts, or a post that like another colleague has made. So like you, or Farrah Harris, or Amanda Fernandez, or somebody, or Madison Butler, or may have said something like, and then I have an idea for a post, and so either it's a response to one of my posts, it's a post that one of you guys makes,
Yeah,
or something in the news, like the Harrison Butker thing.
right.
I was like, I'm just going to say something, finally. Or something I've just been ruminating over for a while. Like a lot of times,
Yeah,
90% of my posts is not me firing at the hip. It's like something I've thought about for a while and wanted to
yeah.
say, and so I finally just get it out there, And so, and sometimes LinkedIn algorithm is weird. Sometimes I think it'll do
Oh, it
well and
is.
it won't, and sometimes I won't think it do well and it will, And it's just sometimes I'm like, well, I'll recycle a post, or I'll just put something together, and maybe it'll do well, it'll do okay, and then it just flies off the handle. Like
Yeah,
when I posted about white supremacy, I was like, okay, maybe this will get restricted or taken down, but it didn't. It blew up.
it
Or like
didn't. Yeah.
it did well the first day, and the second day I was running some errands and I checked it, and all of a sudden the viewer count like spiked. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then when it spikes, then you get the trolls, because you it's reached past your network. Now other people are seeing this. And so like, oh
Yeah.
boy, it's gonna be a long day. It sure was.
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of thick skin in the LinkedIn streets,
There we go.
but it's
LinkedIn
so
Street.
necessary. And let me tell you, it does me great joy when I read something that resonates deeply, and I'm like repost or I comment on it, because yeah, it's my way of just amplifying that this content needs to be reached by a broader audience. So I'm curious, and maybe this is something that you're percolating, Paul, but you haven't yet started socializing. So if this is a question that you're kind of holding close to the chest, or an answer to a question that you're holding close to the chest, we will greatly respect that. But is there a book in your future at all?
There is. And I've even posted about this. So I put together a proposal package. Because
Yes.
I would like to do the traditional route. Like
Okay. Yeah.
I want to say I respect self-publishing, and um, I respect that there's a need for that, but like for me, I don't have the time, energy, resources, talent, whatever wherewithal to
No.
do everything, because with self-publishing, you got to do everything,
Oh
you know.
yeah.
And
You're
so,
right.
and
Yep.
so I want the guidance and expertise of people in the publishing field. But like I've proposed, queried like 3 or 4 publishers, and they've all turned me down. One gave me a really detailed response. In fact, it was Barrett Kaler, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Barrett Kaler Publishers, and they post
Yeah.
a number of books from people I'm connected with on LinkedIn. Like a number of people, I can name 5 connections who've gotten their books sold through
Yes.
them.
I'm very familiar with that publisher. Yes.
Yeah, and so like one of their submissions editors was like, yeah, I like the title of your book, and your LinkedIn writing is good, but given the backlash, I don't know how many speaking applications you would get, and who you outside of LinkedIn. I'm like, well, LinkedIn is my main thing. I'm not really, and how many speaking engagements have you got? I'm like, well, I was getting some, but then the backlash that I'm suffering. A lot of consultants are not getting any clients anymore, and so
Yeah.
and he's like, yeah, it basically boiled down to he didn't think I'm connected enough, and it stung, because I felt like, dude, your publisher is publishing some DI books here, some good books, and I can name them, but whatever, I posted about a month or so ago, and I was really disappointed, but like I don't know, it's just I think he's right in some ways that yeah, the backlash would hurt sales or at least would make speaking engagements probably unsafe because one of their authors won't travel to 30 states. They're not going to travel, and
Oh, wow.
I can't blame them,
Wow.
so so it's just
Yeah,
yeah, it's just kind of a I know so yes, there is a book,
there's a book.
but there's a pretty big hurdle because of the
Yeah.
climate plus the fact that LinkedIn is my only gig of my
Yeah.
like social media outlet. So I'm like, okay, maybe I should do TikTok and see if I get 100,000 followers on TikTok, but so I don't know. I really don't want to do a self-publishing route. It's just like I just don't have it in me to do that. But like I don't know. I don't know what I need to do to get publishers on my side or and so
Well, it definitely is a process. Sounds like you're doing the right things. And I'm going to agree with Andrea Payne in our community who shared in the chat. Don't give up or let that discourage you. I have so many author friends that have um, I mean, I can't tell you how many no's, countless no's before the right yes come along. And it's so important also to make sure that you, as the author, you're feeling just as comfortable that the publisher is completely invested. So sometimes those no's for like maybe the reason that you received, it is for our own good. Because if they don't feel like they're going to push it because they already are sensing that maybe it's not going to do as well, then yeah, you need someone that believes in it as much as you do. And then so I would say continue trying. The self-publishing, it is a lot of work. My book number 2 was self-published. Book number 1 was a hybrid, and book number 3 is independent publisher, Forbes Books, but it was a whole process in and of itself. But this community is standing with you.
thank you.
We are claiming it for you because your content is just way too needed and too meaningful for us to not be able to have our society benefit from your voice and your work. In the meantime, hey, we're just going to all, and a matter of fact, we're going to make sure that this community has your LinkedIn information. So we're going to drop that into the chat so that folks who aren't already following you will follow you. And you will not regret it. Let me just say again, you will not regret following Paul. You will not. Okay, so we're actually winding down a little bit, but I want to give you a chance to share with us what's on the horizon for you. And actually, what are you doing right now? Are you still in academic advising, or are you running your own kind of company where you're
Yeah.
consulting? What are you doing right now, Paul?
Yeah, so I have my own consulting company, but I don't have any clients because of the backlash. A lot of times people would either after a post or a podcast, people would DM me like, oh, what are your rates? And would you be interested in doing this? I'm like, yes, and then and they just kind of ghost me or just back out really quickly, and this I think it's just this whole climate has gotten people shaking, and so
Mm,
they want to do it, but they just the knees. It's like coming to the edge or something. They're like, nope, I'm not going to jump. And so, so I still have that going, and I make LinkedIn content to try to get more clients or at least get people on my side. And then I work retail management. It's my main job. So, it's good pay. It's honest work. It's not my calling, but um,
yeah,
I work retail
no,
and so yeah, I write when I can, but right now I'm just trying to regroup and figure out like, okay, because I'm really leaning towards going to TikTok, but then of
yeah,
course there's the ban on TikTok and we'll see what actually goes through and when.
yeah,
And so yeah, debating on what's my next platform and trying to get myself psyched up for that because that's gonna be a lot of work energy and some work. And so
yeah. No,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I'll tell you what I love about your story, and I'm using story broadly, but is the recognition of how powerful your voice and your content is. Um, and also recognition of the fact that you don't necessarily consider yourself to be this DEI expert or practitioner. I mean, you work in so many different sectors, but you bring a lens of DEIB to the spaces and the places where you show up. And I think that's important to amplify because there's so many of us who care deeply about this work that are on the sidelines because maybe it's not our title or we don't think that it's part of our calling. And so we're just kind of passive. And I talk about this in my book. I think that we need to get people to move from passive to being much more active and intentional about the role that we can play even if it's just leveraging our voices and our LinkedIn, profiles or whatever it is to amplify messages and thoughts that helps people to interrogate their own thinking and how they're showing up to the world. And so I just, want to make sure that that is, being spread to this community. And obviously, I know that this community cares about this work because you wouldn't be here if you were not wanting to deepen your knowledge and your understanding. But I think that's important. So many of us see this solely as the work of the person who carries the title of chief diversity officer, leader, manager, or HR director. And I often say this work belongs to all of us. And so we need to find some additional ways to get as many of us as possible into the fold. And so yeah, continue to leverage your voice. And I don't know much about TikTok. I'm not actually on TikTok, but I have been following and I am aware that there are threats to ban TikTok. And so we'll have to see what's going to become of that.
Yeah, so when I finally take that plunge, I'll make an announcement like, okay, follow me here and let's see where this goes, So
Yeah, yeah. So earlier you referenced the fact that the fourth anniversary is upon us of the murder of George Floyd, and so as many of us are going to be exposed to different messages or just being reflective about that moment that was so real, it was so visual to all of us because it was all over the media, and it had tremendous impact at the time. I would love for you just to socialize around your thoughts, Paul, on what do you see as the impact today and the implications of the impact that has either increased or been magnified or decreased, and what can we do to make sure that the spirit of George Floyd remains still top of mind, specifically as it relates to continuing to fight the good fight that you and I both are in, as well as so many others who are part of this community.
I watched the documentary 13th. I don't know if you watched it, but it's like
Have
one of the narrators was like, you have to shock people, and unfortunately, George Floyd's murder shocked people, and a lot of people
yeah,
weren't ready for the reality of police brutality against Black people, and so
right.
and I think that's what the anti-DI initiators, the instigators, they're like, oh, wait a minute, we got to stop this because they want that to keep going, and so how can you appeal to the fears and prejudices of people who don't know any better or who already are inclined to think that way. And so it's like, and I think like it's going to take another situation where people are shocked to get people to wake up. Because think back to when Frederick Douglass talked about the evils of slavery in front of a packed audience of white people in the auditorium, and I heard about that in a documentary, and he shocked a lot of people, Frederick Douglass, and talking about the horrors of slavery and the slave trade.
Mhm.
Um, and think back to the 1955 Emmett Till's murder, and that's the civil rights
Yeah,
movement. And so that was a horrible, horrible, evil, ugly murder. And people seeing a picture of that boy's mangled body, and it's like, oh, and then George Floyd was another Emmett Till,
right.
Frederick Douglass speech moment, and that started. And so I think, and unfortunately, it's going to take another moment that shocks people to get people to 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 right the train back on the track. So,
Yeah, I think you're as unfortunate as that is, I think you are right. We've seen it time and time again. I just hope that whatever kind of next crisis or shock or tragedy that occurs, that the implications and the results of people rallying around a common goal of humanity does not last only for a year or two, right?
yeah,
I want to see us really allow those moments to help us become better. And I think that's part of the disappointment that many of us in this space have when we talk about the murder of George Floyd and how all the commitments were made, and now what we're seeing in terms of people pulling back on the work and those commitments really proving to be empty on the part of many organizations. And so I'm hoping that whatever this next issue is, because we know we're going to be faced with a lot more, that's just the nature of our world and society, um, that it's not going to be short lived, right? So those are my thoughts. I want to give you a moment to close this out, Paul, in whatever way that feels appropriate to you. I know we've talked a lot, but there's probably
Mhm.
something else that we haven't socialized around that maybe you have a lot of energy for that you want to leave this audience with. So I'm
Ah,
going to give you a chance to do that right now.
sure. I will say I really thank you for all of you for being on my side. Sorry, um, Yeah, I just appreciate all your support, and it means a
Yeah.
lot.
Thank you. Thank you. That was so heartfelt. You are making a difference, Paul. You are. And don't let those naysayers cause you to get discouraged, because if your content was not impactful and making a difference, they wouldn't be paying you any attention or coming after you. I hope that you'll take a moment to look through some of the love that's been shown in the chat. But you're getting some thank yous, you're getting some people that are standing with you. They're hoping that that book is going to come out. And also someone in the community has said, thank you for always making Black women survivors feel supported and uplifted. So I think it's moments like this that really helps us to hone in on and be grounded around the impact we're making, which hopefully will diminish thoughts of some of the negativity that's also coming our way. At least that's my hope for you today and all into the future. But thank you so much, Paul, for just being a part of our community, for your voice, for sharing time with us today. And I want to thank each of you for showing up. If you have found this conversation to be useful, and you know of others in your network that would value being able to catch the podcast or even the replay of this podcast, then we hope that you will share it out. We also have placed a link into our chat and also into the LinkedIn comment section, because we are taking testimonials as we routinely do. This helps us to be able just to promote some of the impact and the positivity of the podcast that our audience is receiving, so that we can build this community. And so we hope that you'll take a moment to complete that. And we just hope to see you back next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations podcast, where we intersect dialogue of DEI with leadership and business. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.